Okay, and you can stop me if you have any questions for me. Okay, so this is what we have planned. Okay, so yeah, so I'll start. Maybe if you have any questions, probably you can stop me so I can discuss. Okay. So I have shared my screen. So this is Oracle login or the landing page after you pass your username and password. Okay. Okay. So uh, so first I'll start with the security part. So in Oracle, so how we are managing the security is that at multiple levels. So the first, okay. So before that, I'll talk about the SaaS and PaaS and the yes, the model. I mean the model how we wanted to manage our database, how we wanted to manage our application. So why do we need PaaS application? So what is the benefit of having SaaS application? So all those things we will discuss first, and then probably I'll take you to the system. Okay, and I'll explain you a few things in the system, what we have in the application. So firstly, so we have SaaS. So SaaS, probably you might be aware that SaaS is nothing but Oracle product. So whatever is Oracle is giving, so we can just utilize this application and we can implement whatever is given by Oracle. So this is in simple term SaaS, which means I will have my application with me, but I'll not have the control over my database application, meaning I cannot update or edit any information like any other on-premise application. Okay, so that is one thing. So now what is PaaS application or when will I need the PaaS application? So let's say I have an need to communicate with my external application. So let's take an example of an telecommunication industry. So wherein I have an requirement wherein I'll have the sales order created in some other application, which means the mobile application. Okay. So this data is stored somewhere. So I'll get this data. So which I'll not be able to do it with SaaS application. So with SaaS, what I can do is that in terms of integration or connecting with some other application, so all I can do is that, so probably I can use the bank protocol between the file transfer or the API calls that I can do with this system called SaaS. Okay. But whereas with another custom application, I'll not be able to communicate. So we have something called OC. Okay, using that we'll be able to communicate with the other system. So that is when we will have the SaaS in place. Okay, so now what is the difference between PaaS and the IaaS? So IaaS is another level of control to the application. So even if we are using the IaaS as an maintenance part, so still we will have certain controls, but the management of the database and the other parts will be handled by Oracle. Okay, so you might be aware that if you want to do a refresher, probably if you want to do a clone of an already existing system, so you'll have to raise an SR. So similarly, so now the control will have with the Oracle, but we will have certain portion of control in terms of customizing certain parts and in terms of writing API calls and these things. Okay, so that's about the high level on the SaaS, PaaS, and the IaaS model of handling the data and the application. So, any question on this?
I'm good, Arun.
Okay. Okay, so that's about this thing. Okay, so coming to the database. So what we have is that two database I can say. So one is that the traditional database that we have, okay, Oracle traditional database, and the other one is S-based database. So S-based database is a cubical representation wherein I can pull the data based on my cubical values that I want to generate. Probably I can use multiple dimensions, so wherein I can take multiple segments as an values. Okay, so I'll store these
Arun, you have any
values.
document for this?
So
What you
now if
say?
I want to, currently I don't have it here, so probably I can share it after the session because I had it in the drive. Currently I don't
Okay,
have it with me.
okay, okay.
Yeah, so probably I'll share it after the session. probably I can check, and if there is, I'll share in the group. Okay, so the S-based database is something that it's an dimension wherein I can pull the data. So for example, if I want to take up for a particular ledger or a particular segment or a particular combination, so I can build it by my own. So I don't need any technical help in terms of building this report. One thing. So this is similar to FSG report what we had in EBS. Okay, so this is one thing I can say.
So
And second thing,
does
yeah,
it transfer it live, like the live transactions immediately it gets reflected in both the,
yeah, yes,
once? Okay.
yes,
Mhm.
yes, it is.
So it is inbuilt.
Yeah,
It's like I
just give
don't
me
have
one
any
moment.
other option. If the client has a different reporting tool, and they say I don't want it to reflect my data in S-base, is it that there is an option or it's an inbuilt? If you want to use it,
Yeah,
otherwise
so,
it is always available. Is it
yeah,
something like that?
yeah. Sorry to stop. Just give me
Okay.
1 minute.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Can you come again?
No, I was asking about the S-base. So it reflects the live data, right? Is it an
Yeah,
inbuilt that it goes, the transaction gets reflected in S-base, or do we need to have an additional setup to enable it? Or the
no,
customers has the flexibility of using some other reporting
no, it's
database?
not that we will post it. So what will happen
Mm-hmm.
is that, so once you create this ledger, so this space database, this cube we
Mm-hmm.
call it. So this cube is created. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
now what system will do is that, so the system will refer this particular cube, and if you pass any transaction to this ledger, so automatically a transaction will be posted referring to this particular queue. So now if you
Okay.
post any transaction, so meaning only the accounting information whatever you are posting it, so that will be part of this particular cube transaction. So other transaction like your payables, receivables, or the fixed asset data, so those will
Mm.
be still part of your traditional Oracle database. So this is only the general ledger accounting information that are stored in this particular database, space cubes. Okay,
Okay.
so this is tagged with your cube data. So that is what we are referring to the cube dimensions.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Mm.
Okay.
So even if the customer uses a different reporting tool, should I have to populate this S-base, the balances, the account balances to S-base, or it's automatically the system takes care of it whenever there is an account balance update, it gets
Okay.
reflected.
No, you don't have to
How's
do
it?
anything. So if you are
Oh,
getting data from some other application, let's say you have a system to get your GL data. So let's say you are importing as a manual journal entries, and when you're
mhm.
posting this entry, so system will transfer these entries or this transaction directly to Space Cubes. So it's an
Okay.
automatic process. You don't have to run it manually.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other question?
I have one, Arun. Like, is it
Yeah,
that this space cube is that used for EPM and other? So you said all the transactions will go right, and
correct.
we have the EPM. Does it
Hmm.
use through the SBase?
No, EPM is different. So EPM wherein you have this budget forecasting and then you have the account reconciliation, all those things. But
Hmm.
this is different from EPM. So we are not going there talking about EPM. So EPM is completely different product. So this is part of your general ledger accounting information. So this will be stored in this particular database. So this is different from your EPM product.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, any other question?
Good, Arun. We can proceed.
Okay. Okay, so that's about the another part of reporting. Okay, so probably we'll see in detail. So when we see the general ledger module. So for now, I'll just get you through what is what. Okay, so the next thing what we have is that OTBI. So OTBI is nothing but the transactional business intelligence. So wherein you can just drag and drop a column and you can build your own report instead of writing a huge query to build a report. So in terms of reporting, so this report, what I'm referring to is your payable, receivable, any other data that you wanted to take or drill down. Okay, so that you can do. So this data either you can see as it is, which means that whenever the data is created or the transaction is created, you will see in the report. So that is one thing. And also you have an option to drill down. So probably if you want to drill down to a transaction level, so that is also possible. Okay, and you can also sort your data to filter it out. Okay, and you can also set your parameters to filter it. So these are the multiple options that you have in OTBA report. Okay, so OTBA report, so probably so any report if you see in Oracle Fusion, so you can take it in PDF, Excel, or any other format. So this OTP report will give you option of downloading in multiple formats. Okay, so you can do that. So we'll see this also. Okay. So now talking about the security. So one thing is that the entire security is handled based on your roles. Okay, so when it say role, it is job role. Okay, so maybe the duty role and those things will be accumulated with job role. Okay, so we'll see an sample job role, so how you can customize it. Okay, so basically, we have standard roles. So let's say I'm creating a journal entry. So what I'll do is that I'll attach general accounting accountant. So probably okay. So since I am only entering the journal entry, so now I don't want to give access to the period closure and the other activities. So now I will have to customize my roles in order to fit and to create only the journal entries. Okay, so that is about the customizing the roles that is attached to the user. So if you are not customizing it, so probably this particular user will become like a super user or a manager who does control the period closure activities and your journal entry creation and managing the journal entries, all those functions he can do. Okay. So basically, he will be an employee who manages certain business in a particular locality, okay, or the region, we can say. Okay. Yeah, so that's about this thing. Okay. So now, what are the modules that we'll cover is that? So primarily, we'll look at the general ledger module, payable, receivable, cash management, and fixed assets. So primarily the core finance modules. We'll look at it. So to start with, we'll start with general ledger because that's the sequence we will have in terms of financials. Because if you want to create any payable transaction, or if you want to create or probably if you want to create any invoice, so if you're trying to create a setup, so you will need a ledger. So this is your starting point. So what we have planned is that, so I'll be starting with the general ledger creation. So wherein we'll start with the 4C, what is 4C and what are the key decisions that we will have to look at if you're defining your chart of account structure. Okay, so probably we'll see what are the scenarios that we'll have to consider before going into setup and all those things. Okay, so that's about the ledger. So now you have something called primary ledger and you have something called secondary ledger. So those are just an option. So we'll see it. So primarily we'll see what are the transactions that we can do. Okay, and then we have something called calculation manager. So this is similar to your mass allocation, wherein if you want to distribute your expenses across your department or the branches, so you can do so. Okay, so that is one thing. And the second part is that in terms of intercompany transactions. So when we say intercompany transactions, so there are two kinds of intercompany transactions. So one is the actual intercompany, okay, between the entity. Okay, so before that, how do we define this intercompany? Is that so based on the balancing segment value that is associated with this particular ledger? Okay, so if it is within the ledger as the legal entity, so we'll call it as the normal intercompany transaction. Okay, so if it is across the ledger, let's say I have ledger 1 for UK and I have ledger 2 for US. So now the BSV1 is associated with UK ledger and BSV2 is associated with US ledger. So now if these two are doing transaction, so we call this as an Advanced Global Intercompany System, AGIS. Okay. So whereas if I'm doing transaction within the ledger, that is US ledger, so I have one in New York and the other one is in Chicago. Okay. So now this will become my intercompany transaction within the system. So I don't call this as an advanced AGIS transaction. Okay, basically. And then we have something called financial orchestration. So that is not part of financial, but just to understand, I'm just saying this. So we have something called financial orchestration. Okay, so what this will do is that, so basically, so there will be a need wherein there will be a company. So let's take an example. Okay, so I have company A and I have company B. So when I say company, so these are two different line of business. Okay, so let's say one is into manufacturing and the other one is into
You are showing something, Arun. Sorry.
no, sorry, I did not prepare a slide for
Okay.
this.
Can you work
So
out in Excel and show the example?
okay, okay, yeah, sure. Okay, so let me just put this data. So so there are two companies. Okay, so this is company A and this is company B. Okay, so company A is manufacturing, let's say, cloths. Okay, which means that designing and making the cloths. Okay, so the company B is manufacturing steel. Okay, so now, so company A is building some infrastructure for their own. Okay, for which they might purchase steel from this company. Okay, so that is one scenario. Okay, purchase of steel.
Arun, I think I am seeing a blank bookwork. Yeah, now I can see it. Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
Yes,
it's
yes.
little delay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
okay, purchase of cloth for employees. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen now. So this is the scenario that I have. Okay, so that is company A. so which involves in manufacturing cloths or the material, okay. And company B, so this involves in manufacturing steel as a product, okay. So now the scenario is that, so company A purchases from company B for their construction or building their infrastructure, okay. Comp Company B purchases clothes for their employees, so probably they have uniform and these things, okay. So they do purchase from company A. So now the scenario is that, so I have purchase transaction, so which means if I take the first transaction, okay, so this is my transaction one, okay. So my transaction one is for company A, so this is an purchase of steel. So similarly, if I look at the transaction one, okay, so this is sale of steel. Okay, so similarly, my transaction two, it is purchase of cloth. Okay, and here it would be sale of cloth. So now, if you see here, so it's not that I can just create an invoice and settle the transaction. So I might have my intercompany transaction. So though it is the same entity, as a parent, okay, but if I look at the financial transaction, it will be two different companies and it will be two different transactions, so that is purchase and sales. So now I will have to create an invoice. So how do I create invoice, or how do I initiate this transaction? So probably I'll explain the flow, so not to take much time in the supply chain part. So what I'll do is that I'll create an order, okay, I'll book SO, okay. So how do I book SO? So I'll not have the actual price. So instead I'll have the transfer price, because I'll not be able to do that to this particular transaction, because in the regular transaction I'll have my profit margin and I'll have my cost. Okay, costing will be included. So when I say costing, so this is manufacturing costing, purchasing cost, and all those costing parameters will be included, including my packing material costing. Okay, so now after doing this, so I'll have my profit margin. But since I'm doing transaction within my entity, so probably for the purpose of financial transaction, I do this way, wherein I create invoice. So now I'll do transfer order. Okay. So now, so transfer price. Sorry, I put it as transfer. It is transfer price. Okay. So now I do shipment. So once the shipment is done, what will happen is that, so automatically invoice will be raised in order management. Okay. So this is AR part, because we are talking about this transaction. Okay. So that is sale of cloth. I mean, this is the same flow that you look at for the first transaction also. So it is only the entity that will change. Okay. So now I'll have the receipts created, okay, because I'll have the settlement process also. So similarly, what will happen here is that the purchase transaction will be created, okay, meaning that I'll be creating the purchase order. So again, this will be on the transfer price, okay, and then probably I'll have the receipt. So this is our regular flow in terms of P2P and O2C, okay. So after this, I'll have invoice and I'll have the payment. So now where will I have my intercompany transaction is here in this part. So when I do invoicing, so I'll have my intercompany receivables and I'll have my intercompany payables. So now here I'll have my intercompany payables and here I'll have intercompany receivables. Okay, because company A is selling cloth, okay, and company B is consuming cloth. So I'll have the payables or the liability created, and then here I'll have the receivables created in the system. Okay, so this we call it intercompany or the global intercompany transaction. So how do we say this? or how do we define our structure? So because I have a ledger, let's say clothing primary ledger, okay, and I have probably the steel primary ledger. So similarly, the same thing I have it as an legal entity. Okay. So let's assume that I have this unit created in probably US. We can say US or India. So okay, because both the way, so I'll have this setup as same. Okay. So I'll have one legal entity, okay, for each separate legal entity, since I'm doing transaction or the business in two different ways, because this is into cloth business and this is into steel. Okay, so I'll have two different legal entities, which means that I'll have two different registration. Okay, so now, so let's assume that I have same chart of account structure for both clothing and steel. Okay, so now I'm creating a transaction, which means I'm initiating this transaction. So this will be my point of initiation. So sorry, I'm here. So this would be my point of initiation. Okay, and this would be my end point of this thing. Okay, so now if you look at this transaction as a whole, so I have my ledger. So now I have let's assume that 0 1. 0 1 is my segment. Okay. So BSV 1. So this would be 0 2. So 0 2 is my second entity. So this is 0 2. So now let's assume that so I have my another entity within this ledger. Okay. So this will be my BSV 2. So now if I do transaction between these two, so what I'll say is that, so this is my intra-company transaction because I have this inside one particular legal entity. So if this is across legal entity, so I call it as an intercompany transaction. It is not advanced intercompany transaction, but it is normal intercompany transaction. So since this is inside a legal entity and two different BSV, so I call this as an intra-company transaction, but we are talking about transaction between BSV 01 and BSV 02. So this is called as AGIS transaction. Okay. So how do we do this is that using financial orchestration. Okay. So as I said, this is uh, more of a supply chain component, but to understand we will talk about this. Okay, because since it involves this one. Okay, so now how do we define this intercompany transactions and system as such? So we have something called balancing segment. So balancing segment will give us an option to define it. So now there are two ways that you can look at it. So since the BSV is different, so we'll not be able to use it as it is, because here if you see company 01 and here if you see company 02, if I'm doing transaction between these two entities, I'll not be able to do it. So probably what I can do is that, so I can define my chart of account structure such a way that I will have my first segment as ledger. Okay, so here ledger will be clothing, and the second value would be steel. So this is my ledger. So now my company would be, let's say 0, let's not say 0, so let's call it 100 200. Okay, so this will have again another value. Okay, so now we have something called primary balancing segment. Okay, and we have something called secondary balancing segment. So we know that balancing segment is nothing but I want my debit and credit to be always equal. Okay, which means this segment, that is ledger segment, it will be always equal. My debit and credit will be always equal. So now the same thing applies to this one also, that is secondary balancing segment. So now I have kept this one, that is ledger, as in my primary balancing segment. So now my secondary balancing segment is uh, my company segment. Okay. So now when I post any transaction, so my secondary ledger, that is debit and credit, should be always equal. So now where will I use this secondary balancing segment? So we are not talking about drawing a trial balance at secondary balancing segment. We are talking about the intercompany transaction wherein I can use this. So where I can use this? So this is at the balancing segment. Sorry, balancing rules. Okay. So what is balancing rules? So balancing rules is nothing but it's basically a rule that defines when this intercompany transaction should be generated. Okay. So now, if you see in this scenario, so I'm creating transaction between my clothing and steel entity. So now I will define rule based on this first segment, that is at the ledger. Okay, because for me the ledger and the legal entity both are same. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll create transaction from this. Okay, so this will create the invoice automatically. So when this invoice is created, this intercompany transaction is created automatically. Okay. So that is happening based on the balancing rule that is written between clothing and steel. Okay. So now I have another scenario. So wherein I'm doing transaction between 100 and 200. Okay. So what will happen is that, so in this scenario, I'll not be able to generate it because in segment that we have created. So we have something called additional balancing rules. Okay, so this additional balancing rules, what this will do is that, so this will basically create the intercompany transaction between these two entities. So for that, I should enable secondary balancing segments. Okay, so in this case, again, I'll have this as an base, that is this segment, what I'm referring to, that is company. So for this, I'll write a rule that if this rule is matched, so this is the accounting entry that system should generate. So I'll have my source. Source is nothing but the journal source we are talking about. Okay. So when this matches, so generate this accounting rule is what I'll define in the system. Okay. So now this entry will be generated automatically by system. Okay. So this is one thing, and the second thing is that transaction between clothing and steel. So this is nothing but RAGIS transaction. Okay. Any question on this?
So here the secondary balancing segment, it is act like a
Hmm.
clearing company.
Yeah,
So
correct.
so
Clearing
that
company.
okay, okay.
Right.
So we can use it both for intra and intercompany rules,
Correct.
right? Balancing rules.
Correct.
Okay, fine, got it.
Correct. Correct. Okay. Yeah, fine. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah. Okay. Okay. So probably we'll proceed. Okay. So I'll just go through the system. So what do we have? And so I'll start with this one, payables. Okay. So we have something called IDR. So IDR is nothing but the intelligent document recognition. So this is based on machine learning, ML. Okay. So what this will do is that, so we have dedicated email ID, so which is given by Oracle. So that the standard email ID, which we will send as an email. So what I will send as an email is that, so I have my invoice copy with me. So probably I might receive as a PDF from some vendor, and we cannot expect that all the vendors will be sending in PDF copy. Okay. So for this, what we have is that, so we have something called a TIFF files. So we will scan this invoices. So we'll have it in the printed copy. Definitely we'll have as a printed copy. So we will scan it. So we have certain configurations to be done. So in terms of resolution and these things. Okay. So Oracle has given recommended resolutions to keep it so that we'll not have issue in terms of scanning the invoice and importing those invoices. Okay. So now the scanned invoices can be sent as a mail. So there could be possibility I might have probably in a day 20 or 30 invoices. So how do I send this as an one particular batch? So let's say today morning I have 10 invoices in my desk. So what I will do is that I'll not be able to scan each invoice and send separately. So instead, what I will do is that I will scan this invoice, okay, and I will send as a single copy. So how do I segregate? This is invoice one and this is invoice two. So basically, when I scan this particular invoice, I'll scan my first invoice and I leave a blank page and I'll create my second, I'll scan my second invoice and send it as a batch. So now I will
Arun,
run
can
this
you show in
import
the
process.
system?
Uh, I mean that involves licensing. So I mean
Okay.
probably next session I can show
Oh,
that I
this
have it
demo
in the.
demo video, it will not be there. Our thing.
Yeah, that's what I have a test environment, so wherein I can show this. So
Okay. Here it won't work, right?
probably,
Okay.
yeah, probably if the session is not recorded, so I can show that. So probably I can show in the next session or
Okay. Okay. Show the
yeah,
navigation at least. Now, minimize this.
yeah. So then yeah, so yeah, that's what I thought of first explaining, and then
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
show where to see this. Okay. Yeah, so this invoices will be scanned and we will send as an email. Okay, so now how do we recognize this is a scanned invoice? So now here if you see, so this is my dashboard. So wherein I can see my created invoices. So first thing is my scanned invoices. So this is what I was referring to IDR. Okay. So now here if you see, so you have 0 to 7 days invoices, 8 to 14 days invoices. So we don't have any invoices created between 14 days. It's more than 15 days. We have certain invoices. So now if I click this particular invoice, so I'll have the invoice that is created or sent to this particular email ID. Okay, so now I'll just open this particular invoice, the second line item. Okay, so when I open this invoice, so immediately the attachment will be shown in the screen. So now this attachment is nothing but the mail which I sent to the email ID, the Oracle standard email ID. Okay. So why do I have this as an attachment is that, so let's say, so it's not that always system will recognize this particular document completely. Okay. So for this purpose, so we have this document. So I'll just open this document. Okay. So if you can see on the right hand side, so you have the attachment. Okay, so if you click this attachment, so and document will be seen. So this is basically a PDF copy. Okay, so now if you see here, so all the informations are captured correctly except this business unit. So probably if you want to change this business unit, you can change. Okay, if you feel this is the correct business unit, you can leave it as it is. Okay, because since we have changed it already, so we are not seeing this. So how do we identify what is the information that is missing? So this is a warning sign, so it's not error. Okay, so error will be something in red. So probably in the next transaction I'll show you. So what is that error that system is throwing? So there is an invalid transaction also. So this is a valid transaction, that's why we are seeing invoice number and all those information in the dashboard. So if it is invalid, which means that some information is missing, which is mandatory. Okay. Yeah, so probably this is taking some time to load. So I'll explain. Okay. So for instance, if this invoice number is blank, so I don't have to type it manually. So what I can do is that I can place my cursor here and let's say the attachment is open. So I can identify which is my invoice number. Definitely user will know that. Okay, so all they have to do is that just select the field. Okay, system will recognize the machine learning. So it will look at it. Okay, so probably once or twice you will have to train this particular system or the process. From third time, system will recognize, okay, this is the column or this is the field which is referred to as an invoice number. So it's not the same format that all the vendors will give. So if I'm doing a material purchase, I'll have certain format. If I'm doing an capital purchase, I'll have different format. Okay. So when I upload for the first time, system will not recognize. So probably third or fourth time, system will recognize and it will say that this is my invoice number. So since we have done multiple uploads, so system is able to recognize the invoice number, amount, and the line amount. Okay, all those information. Okay. So if something is missing, so all we have to do is that select that particular field or the information. So system will automatically populate those information. Okay. Apart from that, all other are regular process wherein you'll have to validate this invoice and approve it or account it. Okay. So I'll show you one invalid transaction. So wherein we don't have this information. So here, if you see, so it says that invalid, which means that invoice number is not captured in this particular invoice or the transaction. So now here, if you see, the invoice number is blank. So this is the invoice copy. So the system has generated, or this is the invoice that is loaded as it is. Okay. So the reason why system did not pick this invoice number is that here you can see it is blank. So what I will do is that I'll just click here. Okay. And let's say I'll copy. I'll just say date as my invoice number. So usually we will have this. So since this is just a testing environment, so we have this. Okay. So I did not enter the transaction, so I just copied this, and you can see that number is populated automatically. Okay. So this will be two times or three times at max. So from third time or fourth time, system will recognize and it will generate this invoice number. But when there is a column called invoice number, so it should have a value. So if this information is missing, so probably we will ask vendor to send with the proper details, and then the invoice number will be copied automatically here. So as you can see, so this is $10 and system has recognized this and it has created the line also. Okay. So this is about the IDR invoices which system will generate. We don't want to sit and create invoice manually. So the system will take care of creating the invoices. All we have to do is that validate the invoice and make the payment. So again, the payment is batch, or probably if you want to automate the payment, so that is also possible. That can be also done. Okay.
So,
So this
Arun,
is
does it
about
replace the okay? Does it replace this EDA electronic data interface for this invoice processing that you're talking about?
No, it will not replace. Still, you have the EDI also. I mean, this is
Mhm.
another option which we have.
Option, okay. So it
Yeah.
is all done in the UI itself. I don't have to
Correct.
go map column by column, nothing. So
No,
when I have the
no.
invoice image, I can do it in
Mhm.
the UI itself. Okay.
Correct.
And how about the supplier name thing, right? Because the supplier number is in the R system. So
Correct.
in that case, if there
Correct.
is a same supplier name, so how does it pick?
Mm. So system
Um,
will,
the
yeah.
user
So
will have the ability, it will be like a warning message, or it will not populate any supplier name there, and then the user has to manually go pick up the supplier, or how?
no, system will recognize based on the supplier number. So now here in the attachment, if you see, if you have only the supplier, so if it is only one supplier that is present in the system, it will pick automatically. So if it is more than two, let's say ABC Consulting, we have two suppliers. So system will have this as a blank screen, and like this particular column, this will be highlighted in red. So we will have to select it manually. So
Okay,
wherever
okay.
possible, where we have single value, system will pick and process it. So we have multiple values. Of course, we will have to select it manually.
So even the supplier name is mandate the head at the header level. The
Correct.
system will populate all the available information at the line level and the invoice level at the header
Correct.
level, and then we will have to go fill in the user has to go fill in the missing information.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So that's about idea. Okay. Any other question?
So you can highlight EBS versus Fusion. What are the differences we have to see?
Okay. So sorry. Just give me one moment.
Okay.
Okay. The difference between EBS and cloud, I can say. So something that we don't have it in EBS is that OTBI report, first thing, because here it's only a drag and drop wherein we can just, okay, probably I'll show you this OTBI report at high level. We will not be creating it end to end as a process, but I'll show you where to create and how do we create this, because this is just the drag and drop. Okay, so it's here. If you see under tools, so we have something called reports and analytics. Okay. Okay. So here you have two things. So one is report and the other one is analysis. So OTP, what we are referring to is analysis. So I'll just click analysis. Okay. Yeah, so this is meanwhile I'll just explain what is there in cloud which is not present in EBS. Okay. So one thing is that we will not be able to see export to Excel option in EBS, so we'll have to build it. Okay. But here if you see, so wherever you go, let's say I'm opening an invoice dashboard, or I'm going to manage invoices. So I'm trying to pull data from 1st April to probably August, 31st August. So I will have option to export to Excel. So this will not be there in EBS, one thing. And second thing is that what I said is OTB report. Okay, this is second thing. And third thing is that we have a space database, the multi-dimension database. So again, this is not there in EBS, which we have it in Fusion. Okay, and yeah, so quickly I'll just explain you this. So
Arun,
let
at the
me,
org structure level, what is the difference like for EBIS and R12? Is there any major
yeah,
difference or
so
is it the same?
no, it's not the same, because if you
Mm-hmm.
see, so in EBS you have something called business group, but here you have
Mm.
something called enterprise structure. So in EBS, I can create multiple business group. Let's say I have business in US and I have business in UK or probably India. Okay, so let's consider US and India. So now I will create one business group for US and another business group for India, because my currency and my calendar, everything changes. So I'll create two different business group. But whereas here in Fusion, so I will not be able to create two different enterprise. So enterprise is one. So how do I manage this situation? So I have something called legislative data group. So using this, I'll be handling. So I'll be creating two different legislative data group, and using this, I'll be able to give as an option to do setup for both US entity and India entity. Okay. So that is about it. but we will not have the same setup like EBS. So of course we will have see a small change in cloud. Okay,
Okay.
so that is at the enterprise structure level. But apart from
So
that, yeah.
so the legal entity, so
Mm,
the link will be like from the legislative group. It will
correct,
have, we will actually connect to the legal entity, and
correct,
the legal entity will be inspired, will be attached to the ledger. So that's how it goes, right?
correct.
Okay, 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 got it.
Yeah. But apart from that, I mean, legal entity, when we talk about, it's more of an entity registration. But if we look at
Mm-hmm.
the financial transaction, so
Mm-hmm.
probably you will not see much changes into it, except this chart of account structure instance. Because
Okay.
in EBS, you see only the chart of accounts, but here you see chart of account structure and
Mm-hmm.
chart of account structure instance. The reason being, so if I want to probably use a certain segment for chart of account 1 and certain segment for chart of account 2, so probably I can use this and create two different instances, because I'll not be able to attach structure directly to ledger. I'll be attaching the instance to the ledger. Okay, so probably this is one change in chart of account, that is in financial term. We have this change between EBS and cloud, I can say. Okay,
Okay.
so yeah, so then the financial data, so that we have discussed it. So that is the change that we have it here. Okay, and then in payable we have this multi-period accounting. So multi-period accounting is in EBS we will have to set up this SLA and all those things. But here it's not that complex. So still we'll have to write it, but not that complex compared to EBS, I'm saying. Okay,
So when
so
you say multi-period accounting, it goes to the future period also. The from
yeah, of
subledgers,
course.
like even if the period is not open, like if I have two future period, the system
Mm.
will let us to do post it in, to future period also.
Yeah, it is just we are distributing the expenses across the periods, right? Let's say
Okay.
I am creating this invoice, probably let's say 1st of April to 31st of March. So what I'll do is that I'll have this invoices created and I'll have my multi-period defined. Okay, so that is from April to March, and I'll have to generate my invoice on that particular period. Okay, so
Mm.
if if I want to probably generate at once, so that is from April to March, so I'll have to open period. So I mean, this is general rule that unless my periods are open, I'll not be able to create transaction in that particular period. So if I want to
Mm.
generate it, so probably I'll have to open that particular period to post it or to create the transaction in that particular period.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other question?
I'm good.
Okay.
You can see
Yeah.
my
So,
screen.
It's blank, Suresh.
I think loading.
Now,
Yeah.
Yes.
Arun, these are the concept. No, you can explain
Yeah.
some. Basic.
Okay. Okay, so space, we talked about it. So space is nothing but the cubical representation or the multi-dimension data that we will pick. Okay, so that is financial reporting. We call it as FRS. So wherein we can generate the reports based on the dimensions if you want to give. Okay, so that is the first item, that is cube. So as I said, this cube will be generated. So when we create this ledger setup, so when I submit the ledger configuration or the accounting configuration, so system will generate the cube. So sometimes probably we might want to generate the cube manually, but most of the times we we will not be able to, I mean, we will not have need to generate this cube manually. Okay, so that's the thing about the space cube. Okay, and the balancing segments. So this has also been discussed. So that is primary ledger. So that's what we were talking about, the advanced global intercompany. So wherein we talked about the primary balancing segment and secondary balancing segment and third balancing segment. So the concept is same. So which means that my debit and credit will it should be same, but it's about how do we handle it. So it depends on the business requirement. So one such requirement that we saw is that, so probably I wanted to have my intercompany transactions generated at the ledger level for certain scenario, and I wanted to generate the intercompany transaction or the intracompany transactions inside a particular ledger. So that is what we refer to this secondary balancing segment. Okay. And then the third balancing segment, I mean, the third balancing segment, we have it theoretically, but I haven't seen any client having the third balancing segment. I have seen second balancing segment. Okay. So the point or the decision that has to be taken in terms of secondary balancing segment is that because uh, when will I use secondary balancing segment, or when I use this secondary balancing segment, so I will have to write few SLA rules to cover this intercompany transaction. So for instance, so I'm creating an payable invoice, okay, so which has probably the VAT or the GST in it. Okay, so now I can use the automatic offset, but this is going to generate this automatic offset, or it will handle only the liability or the expense code combination. But talking about the taxation part, it is not going to generate the sequence, or it is not going to generate the intercompany transaction entries. Okay, so now I'll have to write rules in order to achieve this. So it depends on the business scenario whether we wanted to enable the secondary balancing segment or whether we wanted to have the primary balancing segment. But I haven't seen wherein the third balancing segment is used, but the concept is same. So similar to the secondary balancing segment, so we can use the third balancing segment also, which we will enable it for a particular segment, a chart of account structure. Okay, so that's about the balancing segment. Okay, and then we talked about the intercompany balancing rules also. So the rules is nothing but how do we want to generate our intercompany entries. Okay, so if I'm using this particular transaction between entities, so what are the entries? So when do I see intercompany payables and when do I see intercompany receivables? So that is based on this rule. So now this rule can be written at multiple level. Okay, so system will look at the lower level, and then from there it will look till ledger. Okay, so first thing what system will look for is that BSV, balancing segment. Okay, so if I have written rule at balancing segment and at chart of account structure, or probably let's say ledger level, so system will first look for BSV and then it will look for chart of account, legal entity and ledger. Okay, so now when do I basically configure at ledger level, or when do I configure at legal entity? Is that, so probably if I'm doing transaction between the legal entities, I have one ledger called steel primary ledger. Inside this steel, I have multiple legal entities, which means that I have one entity in Chicago and I have the second entity in probably different location, Alaska or somewhere. So how do I define that this is a different legal entity? It's based on multiple factors, right? It's based on your taxation, it's based on your reporting, it's based on your statutory requirements, so all those things. So now if I'm doing transaction between legal entity 1 and legal entity 2, so what I'll do is that I'll do write rules based on my legal entity, not based on my ledger or the other segments. I mean, you can write at BSV also, but again, it's based on the structure or the chart of account structure that we have defined in the system. Okay. But in terms of options, we have four options. So one is that BSV, and the second one is chart of account. Third one is legal entity, and then the ledger. Okay. So this is one thing. And second thing is that we have additional balancing rules wherein I can use my secondary balancing. So that is what we were discussing on the point number 2, that is secondary balancing segment. Okay, so that I can use it here in the additional balancing rules. Okay, so there I can make use of generating the intercompany transactions as well. Okay, yeah, and again the allocation. So we spoke about the calculation manager. So this is nothing but distributing the expenses across your this thing branches or the department. Sorry, not branches exactly, it's department. Okay, so that's about the calculation manager. Okay. So the financial reporting, again, we spoke about the multi-dimension database, so that is space. So wherein we'll have our chart of account structure as an base, and on top of that we will create report, which is what we told as an FRS, Financial Reporting Studio. Okay, so I can have multiple what do you call the formatting options, and I can probably define report in multiple formats. Okay, so it's basically financial report. So let's say I wanted to generate the balance sheet report, and I have a requirement to build my parent-child hierarchy. And from this report, I wanted to drill down to a transaction. So I can do that. And if I have a requirement not to show the zero valued accounts, so I can do that. And if I wanted to probably highlight any particular amount or the track any particular amount, I can do that. So all these things I can do in FRS or the Financial Reporting Studio. So that is what about the financial reporting. Okay. And then the user interface, that is dashboard or the infolets. So that's what we saw in scanned invoices. Okay, so wherein we talked about the idea. So if I want to probably look at only the scanned invoices that is imported between 0 to 7 days, I can do that in the dashboard. So dashboard which gives me the invoices that are created probably recent transactions. Okay, so what I'll have in my dashboard is that, so the recent transactions that is created in the system, and the what do you call the immediate actionable items. So there you will have also the hold invoices. So hold invoices is nothing but the invoices are in hold. So probably you might want to take action to that particular invoice, and probably after that you will have to manually release it. So like EBS, you cannot write rules or the workflows to the hold. So this is completely manual. So there is an enhancement request with Oracle. So they are yet to bring this workflow configured for the holds. So if there is a requirement to hold the invoices automatically, so that will not happen in current environment. So it's set to release. Okay, so that's about the whole. So yeah, that's what. So it's about the immediate actionable items will be there. So you have multiple infolets. So we saw one as an scanned, and the other one is recent invoices, and then we saw the prepayment, and then we saw hold invoices. So similarly, you have different infolets in the system. Okay, so probably you can look at each one of it. So if you click that particular infolet, so information related to that particular infolet will be displayed in the bottom. So the infolet that we saw is that scanned invoices. So the moment I clicked on the scanned invoice, so it showed or it listed 10 or 20 transaction. I think it is 20 transactions was listed out. Okay, so probably I can look at each transaction individually. Okay, so that's about the dashboard and the infolets. So talking about the dashboard, so probably there are two things about the dashboard. So you have something called custom dashboard. So you can create custom dashboard and publish it. So that is different thing. So this dashboard, what we are referring to is the standard dashboard that is given by Oracle. Like if you look at the receivables, so wherein if you navigate to receipts, so you have you have logbots entries that is imported, and then you have the receipts that is imported from Excel sheet. So you have something called ADFDA and you have something called FBDA. So FBDA it is different thing. So I'm talking about the ADFDA. Okay. So wherein you'll have the receipts imported listed there for our action. So probably we can look at it if it is out of balance. So sorry. So if it is out of balance, probably you'll have to look at it and upload it again. So you can correct the batch or you can delete the batch and import it. Okay. So similarly, you have the logbots files. Okay. So logbots files, which I'm referring to, it's file-based transfer. I'm not talking about the API-based logbots import. So that is different process. So I'm talking about the logbots file transfer. Okay. So these information you can see in the dashboard. So this dashboard, what we are referring to is Oracle standard dashboard. Okay. So that's about it. Yeah, and then we have the period close monitor. So it's again part of dashboard. So if you click this particular infolet called period close, so you have this period close monitor. So wherein you'll have on top you have general ledger, and this will be broken down to the subledgers, that is payable, receivables, projects, and all those things. Okay, so you can see those details. Okay, so now you will see the latest period. So probably you will have the data set there on top left top corner. Okay, you can change the data set. So data set is nothing but your ledger. So you can change that to see the open period of that particular ledger. Okay, or probably if you want to see for a particular period whether the period is open or closed. Let's say I'm doing a migration activity, so I wanted to understand whether the March period is in closed status or it is in open status. So what I can do is that I can change the period to March. It is going to tell me whether it is in closed or open or future enterable. Okay, so it is going to give that information to me. So that's again kind of a dashboard wherein you just click this particular infolet. It is going to say whether the period is open or closed for the particular data access set. Okay, so that's about the period close. So again, the so it's recommended approach that we close the subledger and then we close the general ledger. Okay. So now the payable are the receivables which we spoke. So that will be closed first. So you have an option in general ledger when you are setting up your ledger options. So you can say that one when the subledger period is closed. Okay. Before the, I mean, when the GL period is closed, before closing the subledger period. So that's about your period close monitor. Okay. Yeah, and then you have something called reference data set. So when do we use this reference data set, or why do we need this reference data set is that, so reference data set basically will have control in terms of accessing the data. So there are two views to this. So one is that in terms of setup. So let's say I wanted to restrict this particular setup. Let's assume that I have customer data. Okay. So this common set. So there are two things. So one is that custom reference data set, and second thing is common. So the difference between both is that, so common is nothing but I can access all those data, but its custom data is nothing but let's say I'm creating a custom called REL 1 and REL 2. So now if I create a customer called customer A under REL 1, I will not be able to access this data under REL 2. So where do I restrict or where do I control this data is that we have that business unit assignment. So wherein I say what is the reference data set that is used to access this particular business unit. If I'm accessing this business unit, or if I'm probably creating any transaction, so it is completely based on this particular reference data set that is associated with this particular business unit. Okay. So now the reference data set, I can say it's custom, so I can restrict it. So when we talk about the customer data, so I cannot use common set as an my reference data set. Okay. So instead, either I can use the enterprise. So when do I go for enterprise and when do I go for specific or the custom reference data set is that. So if I want to have this customer only to this entity, that is REL1, so I'll go for my custom reference data set. Okay. On the other hand, so I have a requirement wherein this particular customer will do business with REL1 and REL2. Okay. So now I cannot have restriction at this point because I wanted to create invoice or the receipt at both the levels. I mean, both the entities, which means that if I wanted to create an invoice with customer A for REL1, I should be able to do it, and similarly for REL2. Okay, so now what I will do is that since I don't have the common set at customer, so I'll have to use the enterprise set. Okay, so this enterprise and common both are same, almost similar. So you don't see any change or the addition to this. Okay, it's similar exactly. Okay, so now I can use this if I want to use across. So if I want to restrict to a particular entity, I'll use this reference data set. Okay, so if I'm using predefined setup, let's say payment terms, I'm using it, I'm not creating it as a new because I don't have a requirement to create it new one. I'll be using 7 days, 14 days, all those things. So it is standard that is given by Oracle. I'm using as it is. So now what I will do is that, so I will associate my reference data set to this particular payment term so that I don't have to create it manually again. So I'll be using as it is. Okay. And my reference, if my reference data set is common, so probably I can use that as it is because by default I will have common set associated with this particular payment term, that is 7 days or 14 days. Okay. So that's about the reference data set. Okay. Any question till this point?
No, Arun. Yeah, good.
Okay.
Maybe a good.
Okay. Yeah. So
Okay, Arun, then you have time, Lavanya, and we'll stop here. Hello.
Maybe for now, yeah,
Ah,
for today we can stop, maybe continue another day.
okay, right.
Yeah, sir.